A cold case confession. Tonight, a murder that has haunted our area for nearly 2 decades, for a little over 2 decades actually, is finally solved. In November of 1998, 18-year-old Miranda Fenner was found murdered at the movie store in Laurel. Her feet bound, her throat slashed. Now, after nearly 21 years, a suspect has confessed to the crime.
The night of November 15, 1998, in Laurel, Montana, was supposed to be like any other night. But for 18-year-old Miranda Fenner, who was simply doing her job at a video rental store, it turned into a nightmare. In a matter of minutes, she was brutally attacked and left for dead. Will justice ever be served for Miranda's untimely death? What happened in those crucial moments before the attack? Let's have a look at the 1998 cold case, finally solved by a confession. There are just over 7,000 people living in Laurel, a small city in Yellowstone County. It is known for its nice people and beautiful scenery. The city is near the Yellowstone River, which offers many ways to enjoy the outdoors, such as swimming and kayaking. Laurel also has a traditional downtown area with shops and restaurants that are very nice. Overall, Laurel has a calm and friendly attitude that is great for people who want to get away from the busyness of the city. Here's where our story starts. In comparison to the peaceful town of Laurel, Miranda Colleen Fenner was born in Sacramento, California, which was a busy city. Mike and Sherry Fenner had her on December 26, 1979. She was not an only child. Instead, she had a younger brother named Tim. When Miranda was 11 years old, her family moved to Laurel, Montana. Miranda had to leave her childhood friends and the places she knew, but she got used to her new home quickly and made new friends quickly. She went to Laurel High School, where she did well, both in school and in social situations. But she was busy with more than just books and school. She was also artistic, which she grew by spending time with her family and friends, drawing and learning about the latest fashion trends. Miranda always enjoyed the little things in life, like going shopping with her girlfriends or drawing her latest design. Miranda worked hard for years and finally got her diploma from Laurel High School in May 1998. She was proud of all she had done. Miranda was ready to take on the world when she graduated from high school. Not long after, a chance came up in the form of a job at the movie store, a charming video rental store at 419 Main Street in Laurel. Miranda loved her job, and the regulars at the shop quickly got to know her. She greeted every customer with a big smile, lots of energy, and a desire to help. Miranda's family lived close to the shop, so she often walked to and from work while taking in the sights and sounds of her favorite town. Miranda was happy with her life, but fate can be cruel, and disaster soon hit like lightning on a clear day. On Sunday, November 15, 1998, a few minutes after 8 p.m., the Laurel Police Department got a frantic call saying that someone had been shot at the movie shop where Miranda, who was 18 at the time, worked. The caller was driving by when she saw a woman desperately trying to crawl out of the video store's opening. She pulled over right away to help. As he got closer, he said he was horrified to see that the woman had been shot in the neck and was fighting for her life. Police cars sped through the quiet streets with their sirens going as fast as they could to get to the scene. When they got there, they saw something that shocked them. 3 people crowded around a woman who was lying in a pool of blood to the right of the store's front door. Officers rushed over to help her right away, but it was clear she was in bad trouble. Her body was covered in blood, which made it hard to figure out where the wounds were. She was unconscious and not moving. The only sign that she was still living was a weak pulse. The police officers knew they had to move quickly to save her life. As they tried to get her stable, they saw the deep cuts on her neck and felt their hearts sink. They didn't know if someone had been shot or if something even worse was going on. The cops called for medical help and kept doing everything they could to keep the victim alive until help arrived. The clock was ticking. As an ambulance pulled up to the scene of the killing in the evening, the air was full of tension and fear. As they helped get the badly hurt person into the ambulance, the cops worked quickly. The ambulance then sped through the streets with its sirens blaring, heading toward a nearby spot where a helicopter was ready to take the victim to St. Vincent Hospital in Billings. As soon as they got to the hospital, the victim was taken to an operating room where a group of skilled doctors worked hard to save his life. Everyone in the hospital felt like time was running out, and everyone worked together to save the victim's life. It didn't take long to figure out that the person who died was Miranda. Back at the movie shop, meanwhile, there was a lot going on. The back door of the store was slightly open, which is how the police officers got inside. Inside, chaos ruled supreme. Even though the store was a mess, that wasn't the worst part. Miranda must have crawled in pain from the back of the shop to the front door, where there was a trail of blood. The things the cops saw shocked them. After making sure the crime scene was safe, they quickly told the command staff and officers from both the Laurel Police Department and the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. When the cops got there, they got to work right away. They measured and drew the outside of the store quickly before moving quickly inside. As the detectives looked for fingerprints and footprints, they couldn't help but feel a little bit of fear because the scene was so horrible. The room was filled with the flashes of cameras as they took pictures of the scene, making sure to get every detail as they looked for justice. They got hold of a few things that could help find the person who did it. Patrol officers also looked around the area where they were working, knocking on doors and talking to locals to find out more and try to find witnesses. Officer Wells was sent right away from the scene of the crime to St. Vincent Hospital to check on Miranda's health and collect any important evidence that could help the investigation. When he got there, he was quickly taken to the operating room, where he put on a clean gown and went in. There, he saw how hard the doctors tried to save Miranda's life. But at 10:01 p.m., it was said that she was dead. Her injuries were just too serious. Everyone was saddened by what happened. The news that Miranda had died spread like lightning, and her family soon heard about it. The tragedy hit them like a ton of bricks, and they were heartbroken and had a hard time coming to terms with what had happened. The next day, on November 16, 1998, Dr. Tom Bennett and Dr. Ken Mueller worked together to do an autopsy on Miranda's body. As they looked at her, they found out the horrible truth. Miranda's throat had been stabbed and cut, so she had no chance of living. The only other wound they found was a cut on her right index finger that she had made on purpose. They called her death a murder, which broke their hearts. After Miranda's sad death, police and other law enforcement officers started a thorough search for her killer. They didn't leave anything out. They talked to hundreds of people and looked at every possible option. Even though they tried hard, they couldn't find a suspect or figure out why the crime happened. Since a small amount of cash was taken from the register of the video shop, the detectives could not completely rule out robbery as a possible reason. The next few days were full of frustration and hopelessness as the research seemed to lead nowhere. Even though months had passed, the case was still open and ongoing, and detectives worked hard to find any new clues. Miranda's family, on the other hand, didn't give up hope and took things into their own hands. They made signs with Miranda's picture and the scary words "murdered in Montana" and put them up all over the country, even when they were scared and sad. they never gave up on getting justice for Miranda. 2 years after Miranda was brutally killed, on a hot July day in 2000, Dawson County Sheriff's officers got a tip about a man they wanted to talk to about a traffic-related incident. In the city of Glendive, Montana, the cops saw the man, whose name was not given, and tried to stop him. But before they could even get close to him, the man pulled out a gun and shot one of the cops in the leg. In an instant, the quiet town turned into chaos as police officers ran for cover and shot back. The man was killed at the end of the fight. As soon as the news spread that the man had died, whispers and guesses about Miranda's unsolved murder started up again. Before he died, he was said to have made some shocking claims, including that he had helped kill Miranda in 1998. This was enough to get the attention of Chuck Maxwell, who was the sheriff of Yellowstone County at the time. He was determined to find out who killed Miranda and bring the person who did it to justice. He sent 2 of his best agents to Glendive to find out if the man who was shot and killed had anything to do with Miranda's death. After doing a lot of research, the detective said that the rumors were not true and could not be proven. Miranda's killer was still being looked for. Years went by, and the murder was still not solved. In February 2006, the case again got a lot of attention, this time on a national TV talk show called The Montel Williams Show. Miranda's heartbroken mother, Sherry, and a psychic named Sylvia Brown, who said she knew something about the case, were guests on the show. Sylvia said on the show that she thought the killers were customers at the video shop and had been hanging out there. The psychic also said that Miranda's death was caused by 2 guys between the ages of 19 and 24 who lived within 5 miles of the store. Even though she was having a hard time and didn't believe Sylvia, the psychic, Sherry, thought that Miranda's case needed to be brought to the attention of a wider audience by being on the show. In the end, it wasn't about her questions or fears, but about honoring her daughter's memory and getting justice for her senseless death. The Montel Williams Show changed Miranda's life in a big way. Sherry started getting a lot of phone calls and letters from people who had seen the show after it ran. Sherry was filled with hope and made it her goal to tell the officers working on Miranda's case everything she learned. Even though the clues seemed to point in the right direction, police were unable to find any solid proof that would lead them to Miranda's killer. Years passed, but Sherry never stopped believing. She kept getting tips and leads about who killed her daughter, Miranda, in a terrible way. Every time she learned something new, it felt like she was reopening old hurts. But she knew that even a small clue could help her find out who killed her daughter in 2012. Sherry was determined to find Miranda, so she made new prize posters with her picture and the words "Justice for Miranda" in big letters. The posters offered a $25,000 prize to anyone who could help find the person and asked that they come forward. The signs were put up all over the country, not just in their state, because Sherry wouldn't stop until justice was done. When the Billings Police Department's cold case unit was set up in March 2012, it gave Miranda's family a little bit of hope. Finally, there was a team of detectives whose sole job was to look into killings that had not been solved. The murder case of Miranda was given to the unit, and they didn't waste any time getting back to work to solve it. Frank Fritz and Shane Bancroft, 2 agents, were in charge of the investigation. They looked over old leads and found new ones. Other officers who worked on Miranda's murder as part of the cold case unit were sure that justice would be done. They knew that people in the area knew things that could blow the whole case wide open. They were sure that the killer would be caught soon because DNA testing was getting better and they were getting tips and leads all the time. In October 2013, a woman named Beverly Saylor called the police and said she had important information about Miranda Fenner's murder. Detective Bancroft was told to talk to her on the phone, and when she told him what she knew, he was shocked. Beverly was once married to a man named David Saylor, who already had kids from a previous relationship. They were living in Laurel when Miranda was killed. Beverly said she thought Zachary O'Neill, David's grandson, was involved in the crime and called him a violent person. She talked about things that really bothered her and painted a scary picture of Zachary's character. Beverly says that, over the years, her husband has said more than once that Zachary rented a movie on the night of the murder. She left Montana soon after the murder, but now she was going back. This made her think of the murder, which made her want to call the police. Detective Bancroft was glad to get the information, but he knew they needed to do more research to see if Beverly's claims were true. As he looked into it more, he found that Zachary did live in the area when the murder happened, but there was no other proof that he was involved. It was yet another dead end for the detectives, which was very upsetting. As time went on, different people came forward and said they were the ones who killed Miranda, but each claim turned out to be a false lead. This led the police to chase fake confessions. The case seemed to be stuck in a never-ending cycle of broken dreams and pointless attempts to bring it to an end. In a surprising turn of events, in April 2016, Zachary, the stepson whose former stepmother had accused him, made a shocking statement at a psychiatric hospital in Washington. He said that he was the one who killed Miranda. But detectives were not sure about what he said and didn't believe him because the facts he gave were already widely known. Zachary had also claimed credit for a second murder that had not happened, which made it even harder to believe him. So, agents had to switch their attention to something else in their search for justice for Miranda. A little over a year later, on March 19, 2017, Zachary himself went to the Yellowstone County Detention Facility and asked to talk to officers. As he was brought into the room for the interview, the cops couldn't help but notice that he didn't look too good. They didn't know what was wrong with him because he seemed to be on something. It felt like déjà vu when Zachary told the same story he had told almost a year before. Miranda was killed at the movie shop in Laurel, where he worked. He said that over the past few years, he had been in and out of bars and prisons, and that he had tried to tell medical staff in Spokane about what he had done, but they didn't take him seriously. He then said that he had used methamphetamine, which explained why he was in the state he was in. After Zachary told the truth, the cops didn't waste any time telling Detective Fritz. The agent was determined to find out what was going on, so he told Zachary he would call him the next day. One of the officers, worried about Zachary's safety, offered to drive him to a crisis center. While they were driving, the officer told Zachary to keep his phone charged and ready in case the detectives called. Zachary nodded to show he agreed. 2 days later, on March 21, 2017, Zachary met with detectives Fritz and Bancroft at the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. Zachary's face was wet with tears as they took him to a meeting room. When detectives asked him what was wrong, Zachary told them that seeing the Miranda reward posters in the lobby had made him feel a lot of different feelings. Zachary was nervous and squirmy as he sat in front of the officers. Detective Bancroft saw that Zachary was nervous and told him that he wasn't there to arrest him. This made Zachary feel better. They told him what his rights were, and Zachary said he knew what they were. Before they did anything, the agents made it clear that they would need time to check that what he was going to say was true. Zachary then thought for a moment and said that he wanted to tell his parents first before telling everyone else. The officers nodded and told him that he didn't have to hurry and that he could talk to his parents in his own time. As Zachary started to tell the truth, he took the officers back to when he was a teenager. He said that he had been living in Spokane, but that he had moved back to Laurel when he was 18 years old, in May of 1988. He said he lives at 702 West 12th Street with his stepfather, David Saylor. Zachary said that his drug use got worse and worse, and that he stole and broke into homes to pay for his habits. He soon started talking about the day the murder happened. He said that on that fatal day, he was at home with his mother when she asked him to rent some movies. He drove to the movie shop and rented 4 or 5 movies, including one that was for adults. He talked about the car he was driving at the time and said that he paid cash to rent it. The police found out that David, Zachary's stepdad, rented 4 movies at 4 p.m. on the night of the murder using the account that was linked to him. As Zachary talked, he brought back clear memories of that terrible day. When he rented the movies, Miranda, who was wearing a blue shirt and glasses, had done nothing to make him angry. But when he got home, his mother was furious that he had rented an adult movie and told him to bring it back. He took the film back to the movie shop, and that's when he decided to rob it. He waited until the other customers left, then pulled out a small .22 caliber semi-automatic gun and demanded money from Miranda. She let him take the money, and he didn't hurt her. But then his fear took over, so he took Miranda to a back room and told her in detail how he had tied her up with tape so he could get away. He still didn't like the idea of her being a witness, so he took out his knife and cut her throat. Zachary broke down in tears as he told the police about this horrible scene. He said that when he thought he heard someone coming, he got scared and ran out the back door, leaving Miranda badly hurt behind. As Zachary talked about how he reportedly killed Miranda, the detectives leaned in and kept their eyes on him. But they weren't done asking questions yet. They wanted to know if this was the first time he had hurt someone. They never could have guessed that the answer would be so scary. Zachary's voice shook as he admitted to a cruel act of disobedience and an attempt to kill that happened just 1 month before Miranda's death. The woman he killed was a woman he had seen on Broadwater. He chose to kill her with a coldness that made the officers shiver. Zachary told about how he had cut her throat and thought she was dead. But then he found out something shocking. He had been wearing a condom during the attack and thought he had left it behind when he ran away. The cops were horrified as Zachary told them that he thought the victim had lived because her death hadn't been reported in the news. But why did he try to kill her to begin with? Zachary's answer was simple. He didn't want to go to jail. As the conversation went on, the detectives asked Zachary what made him decide to talk to them after all this time. He talked about how guilty and sad he had been since his stepbrother died in a fire in 2013. Zachary told them that he had been depressed and had thought about killing himself. He also said that he thought it was time to own up to his crimes. The officers were probably shocked by how detailed and consistent his story was. But even after that, they didn't believe him, so they asked him why they should. Zachary replied with confidence that he knew information that had never been shared with the public. The detectives didn't believe Zachary right away because they knew that under Montana law, a confession alone wasn't enough to show guilt. To make sure justice was done, they needed more solid proof. As the questioning was coming to an end, the agents did one last thing to make sure they had everything they needed to solve the case. With Zachary's agreement, they used swabs of his cheek to get a sample of his DNA. The swabs were carefully packed and sent to the Montana Forensic Division for analysis. They hoped that the results would be the last piece of the puzzle that would bring Miranda justice. After talking to Zachary, Detective Fritz and Bancroft worked to find proof that what he said was true. The first thing they did was look into the other case Zachary had mentioned. Their research led them to a cold case that hadn't been solved by the Billings police, which they told Detective Kruger about right away. As they talked about what they knew, Detective Kruger became sure that Zachary's claims fit with the cruel abuse of Julia Lilithan, a newspaper carrier, on September 5, 1988. So, Detective Kruger took the DNA evidence from the case and matched it to the swab from Zachary's cheek. On April 18, 2017, the Montana Forensic Division told the shocking news that Zachary's DNA was found on a condom at the crime scene. Zachary had been lying about his crimes for a long time, but now it was clear that he had done them. Fritz and Bancroft didn't stop there, though. Their investigation took them to a guy named S.B., who was a friend of Zachary's. Spee told detectives during an interview in May 2017 that he had known Zachary since he was a young boy and that he had a past of being violent. Spee talked about specific times when Zachary had been angry, and he also said that Zachary had told him he killed Miranda 2 months before he told the police. Zachary's statement broke Spee's heart, especially since he knew Miranda and her family. Spee told the police that Zachary's stepbrother had died in a fire in 2013. Zachary had been looking for justice for the death of his stepbrother. When the people responsible were found guilty, he felt that justice had been done. Spee said that he told Zachary that Miranda's family also deserved justice, and he told Zachary that he should turn himself in. Spee said he drove Zachary to the sheriff's office in March 2017 so he could talk to officers. The officers were amazed by SB's stories, and they gave them another piece of the puzzle. In May of 2017, detectives Fritz and Bancroft went to Spokane, Washington, to talk to Zachary about the case again. As soon as Zachary started talking, the officers knew they hadn't heard everything yet. This time, Zachary said that he had done something bad to a third woman. He didn't leave out any details when he told how he found her, took her to Riverfront Park, and used her there. The officers were shocked, but they kept asking questions anyway. Zachary said that, other than the violation, he had not killed or hurt the lady. The officers paid close attention because they knew that everything he told them could help them get justice for his victims. At the start of 2019, Detective Fritz was determined to find any case that might have something to do with Zachary's horrible acts. With the help of Autumn Fry, they looked through reports of rape in 1998 and found a case that happened in Riverfront Park on September 12, 1998, just a week after Julia, the newspaper carrier, was abused. As Detective Fritz looked into the case more, he found strange parallels between what the victim said and what Zachary said happened. A hospital had checked on the victim, and DNA proof was found. Detective Fritz chose to compare this DNA evidence to the sample he had taken from Zachary, and the results were clear. They were the same. This just proved Zachary's story even more. The person who was hurt, in this case, died in 2013, but Detective Fritz was more driven than ever to get justice for everyone Zachary hurt. When the officers found all of the strong evidence against Zachary, they knew it was time to do something. Now, after they talked to Zachary in Spokane, Washington, in May 2017, he had gotten into trouble and had been in jail since December 2017 for burglary and gun possession. With a release date of 2024, Zachary was finally moved from Washington to Montana to face charges for the brutal murder of Miranda and the abuse and attempted murder of the newspaper carrier in September 1998. The prosecutors decided not to charge him with the third crime, probably because the victim had already died. On July 23, 2019, Zachary was officially charged with both crimes at a hearing in a Montana courtroom. Immediately, he said he was guilty. The next month, in August, Zachary will be sentenced for both crimes, so he decided to stay in Montana until then. On August 23, 2019, the day of reckoning finally came. When Zachary was being punished in district court, people were very upset. As people were taking their seats, he was brought in chained and handcuffed. Judge Jessica Fair of the district court told everyone that any outbursts would not be allowed. She told Zachary in particular that there were police officers in the room. Everyone in the room could feel how tense it was, and they all held their breath as they waited for what was going to happen. The people in the courtroom paid close attention as Detective Bancroft talked about how Zachary became a suspect in the case after being missing for years. And the air went quiet as Julia, who had been attacked by Zachary on September 5, 1998, bravely took the stand. She told horrifying details about that terrible day and said it was the worst day of her life and the day she met pure evil. As Julia talked about how Zachary hurt her and repeatedly stabbed her in the jaw, head, hands, and arms, everyone in the room sniffled and cried. She talked about how she tried to talk her attacker out of hurting her by telling him she was a single mother with cancer, but it didn't work. The attack hurt her so badly that she will always be in pain and have restricted mobility. But that wasn't the end of the bad things. In the wake of the attack, Julia was left to deal with depression and worry. Many people in the courtroom were moved by the statement, and prosecutors asked for the harshest punishments for Zachary. "My name is Julia Lilithan, and I lived through a serial killer." As Miranda's parents went up to the stand, the courtroom became very tense. The pain of their loss was still very fresh, and seeing Zachary sitting in chairs in front of them only made it worse. When Miranda's mother, Sherry, started to talk, her voice trembled with anger that she was barely able to hold back. "Earth, take everything bad that comes your way. I can't forgive myself, and I'm not sorry for my thoughts." She glared at Zachary and spit out the word monster as she called him a mean person. She went on to say that she could not forgive him for what he had done to her daughter because it was so horrible. Her words rang around the courtroom, making it clear that Zachary's actions had ruined everyone's lives for good. When Chris Copenhaver, Zachary's defense lawyer, took the stand, she told a different story about her client. She said that Zachary's addiction to meth started when he was only 10 years old and got worse over time. Copenhaver, on the other hand, told the court that Zachary had changed since he told police about his crimes. He thought he could change and that he should be given a second shot. Mark O'Neill, Zachary's biological father, and his sister took the stage to show their support for him as a person. They told Miranda's family that they were sorry from the bottom of their hearts and that they hoped they could move on after what they had been through. Soon it was time for the sentence, and everyone in the courtroom held their breath as they looked at Judge Jessica to hear Zachary's fate. As the judge told everyone what Zachary's punishment would be, there was a lot of tension in the room, and everyone was very quiet. For the horrible things he had done to Miranda and Julia, she gave him not 1, not 2, but 3 life sentences. That wasn't all, though. Zachary has also labeled a level 3 high-risk violent criminal, which means he would be closely watched for the rest of his life. Because of how bad his crimes were, he had to stay locked up, and the judge made it clear that he wouldn't be able to get out until he had spent at least 30 years. As Zachary was led out of the courtroom, the punishment hung heavy in the air. He would spend the rest of his life paying for the terrible things he did to his victims. And that was the end of the Miranda Fenner case. A man who had gotten away with terrible crimes for a long time was finally caught and made to pay. Even though he was punished for what he did, the victims and their families will always feel the effects of what he did. Do you think the case would have been solved if Zachary hadn't admitted to the crimes? Use the comments to tell us what you think.